Right, hello, creative interaction. This is, even though it's chronologically for you isn't the last session, for me it is the last session of training I'm recording on video or giving over the summer. So my brain's a bit fried, meaning that I'm going to do my best. This is Diane's session. She did this session with, well, the guys on the Sunday, which is obviously why you're watching the video. Sorry. As I said, fried. Let's continue. So, I'm just going to walk you through basically what Diane has said. I'm not going to get you to pause the video and write notes. I'm just going to, as I talk you through what Diane has said, if you just write notes in the appropriate place, that should help. So, firstly, kind of, as I said, this is about creative interaction, so it's looking at communication and ways of doing things. When we look at communication, so what do I need to know when I find out information about the child? Well, it's really worth finding out obviously what the child is interested in. What do they want to do? What things are they interested? So how can I find out this information? I guess I can find it out from their parents, from other play workers, from the details in the details cupboard. We can share information with one another, and obviously if you look at things like the child's likes and dislikes in the details, that will give you an idea of what to do with them. I guess equally, if you can, just ask the child, what would you like to do, and they can talk to you about the sorts of things that they might like to do. So when we look at how we communicate with people, there are two factors that greatly affect communication between children and play workers, and these are body language and tone of voice. So actually the words that you say to a child have very minimal impact compared to the way that you say them. So words account for, on average, about 7% of communication, whilst your tone of voice and your body language makes a lot more of a difference. So if you look engaged and interested, if you're speaking in a calm and engaging manner rather than in an angry, shouty voice, or, I can't be bothered voice, or anything like that, that's going to make a much bigger impact on the child than what you are actually saying. So if you say, oh, have you hurt yourself? In that kind of way, obviously that's not going to be as engaging. Oh, have you hurt yourself? For instance. So you can tell I would be an excellent actor. Moving onwards, so if you look at, obviously with communication, it's very important that we're taking into account that children communicate on a load of different levels, not just in terms of what you're saying to them. Like, the 100 languages of children is the next thing that Diane has put down for us to talk about. So she said this is probably the most well-known aspect of the Reggio Emilia approach. So this is the belief that children use many different ways of showing their understanding and expressing their thoughts and creativity. 100 different ways of thinking, discovering, of learning. So there are so many ways in which you communicate, basically. You can communicate through drawing, through sculpting, through dance and movement, through painting, through pretend play, through modelling and music, and each one of these must be valued, and each one of these different ways of communicating must be valued and nurtured. So these languages are ways of learning and are all part of a child. So learning to play are not separated. Learning and play, are not separated. So play is the way that the child explores and discovers the world using all of their senses. So think about it like the way that we communicate. We don't just communicate by talking. Like, obviously, if you've got a non-verbal child, they'll communicate through what they can see. So they'll be looking at things that they want to play with. They might communicate through putting things in their mouth. So in the conditioning session, we looked at pica, for instance, which is basically putting non-food substances into your mouth. And I explained how with some children with SPD, they can find putting really strong smelling or tasting substances in the mouth gives them a kind of sensory sensation, which is why they do it. So people obviously can communicate through movement, through eye contact, through touch, through, like, lots of children really love touch and sensory play in terms of what they can touch, what they can feel, and all of these kind of things. So there's loads and loads of different ways in which we can communicate with one another, is basically the point. So moving onwards towards active listening. So what does active listening mean? Essentially, there are lots of ways in which we can demonstrate active listening. All active listening really means is listening actively, making sure you're showing in everything you do that you are actually listening, not just that you're hearing what the child is saying to you or communicating to you, but you are doing all you can to be involved in their world. So One way of doing this is just getting to know them, getting to know what makes them tick, how they try and communicate, what they're trying to communicate through different signs, and being able to kind of work on a better brainwave with them. Being on the same level as the child is really important, so being down low with them if they're younger, trying to, obviously you can't just grow an inch, or not an inch, a foot if they're really tall, but you know, being on the same level with them, trying to understand where they're at, being alert to their needs, so kind of trying to be sensitive to what they're trying to say, trying to work out what signs they're giving off. Are they frustrated? Are they excited? Are they happy? Are they in a bad mood or a good mood? And kind of trying to kind of approach them depending on that. Obviously trying to be engaged, so valuing what they're doing, listening with your eyes, not just with your ears, making sure you're maintaining eye contact at every opportunity. Make sure that you're looking at them properly and you're kind of responding to what they're saying. You're listening sometimes even with your words, like, yeah, that's a good point, and showing them that you're actually understanding. And also your tone of voice makes a huge difference in the way you actively listen. So to show that you're using a tone of voice which is understanding and engaged with what they're saying, that's incredibly important. Most of the time we demonstrate active listening without even thinking. So getting down on a child's level, showing an interest in being alert to them, and using a tone of voice which is neither patronising nor condescending, but valuing what they're doing, are all different ways in which we can be engaged. And often if we just make an effort to be respectful and kind of treat them on a level of kind of friendship and love, really, we are naturally going to actively listen quite well. Other things that we can do, so we can try and use the child's interests in order to be able to play with them. So for instance, if a child really likes riding on the bikes, it's good to try and get them to play on the bikes. But we could not just get them to ride around, we could chase after them, we could play a game, we could take it in turns to go on the bikes, we could put different objects into the bike and then they carry them around in the bike. Other things you could, if the child is really interested in Sonic, then it might be worth trying to talk to them. Oh, what's your favourite character in Sonic? What type of games do you like to play? What types of things do you like to do? Maybe we could play a game. Would you like to play a Sonic game? All of those things. So you're starting to engage. If children like sport, obviously you can find ways of talking to them about sport, playing sport with them, getting them to demonstrate to you their own sports moves, etc. You want to also think about the environment that you're in. So how can you use your environment to meet the child's needs? So very simply, in the environment that you're in, what your environment is just your surroundings. So how can you use your surroundings to cater for the child's needs? So if the child looks like, if the child likes art activities, what kind of art can you get out? What kind of, if they like sensory play and you're here in the sensory room, obviously trying to get some of the materials for them to touch, maybe put them in front of some of the lights or some of the bubble tube or the mirrors, just so they can get various different sensory kind of things in front of them that they can play with and understand. Think a bit about their sensory processing. It's always good to try to research different ideas, and there's 100 different things you can look for. You can look on Pinterest and there's all sorts of ideas on there. Loads of different places where you can find art activities, craft activities, sensory activities, etc, etc. It wouldn't take much of a Google search to find different ways in which you can play with children. So also, don't be afraid to try new things. So sometimes the ideas that you try may not work. They may fail. That's okay. You might try and do some cooking with the children and it tastes like baking powder. You might try, I don't know, you might try playing with the paint or with the water and everyone gets really wet or really messy and then they get frustrated by it. Whatever you try, sometimes it's worth trying ideas. Sometimes they'll work, sometimes they won't. That's okay. The best thing is to just give things a go. If you've got an idea and you want to try it, don't be afraid to give it a go. You can always ask the team leader for some support and backing if you're worried, but to be honest, all I'd say is use your creativity, let your creative juices flow in the way that you play with the other children. Talk to each other, make sure that you're supporting each other. If you give something a go and it doesn't work, tell people if you give something a go and it does work. So for instance, some people have found that one of the children we have here really loves to play with musical instruments. If that's the case, play with the musical instruments with them, by all means. Give it a go, see how they get on, etc. Try and use the time before the sessions to think about your one-to-ones. Sessions generally get set up, but if this doesn't meet your child's individual interests, try and think, what resources can I use to try and cater for their interests. So, do I have a child who really loves art and there's not much art out? Well, maybe I could get some more out. Do I love painting and it's only drawing? Well, maybe I should get some paint out. Is the sensory room open? No. Okay. Well, what other activities can I use for sensory play and that sort of thing with the child that I have? Just kind of thinking of your feet. Well, you have half an hour at the start of the session where you have the meeting and read the details, but any time you have in the middle of that, use it, or after that, sorry, just before the children come, use that to your advantage to be thinking through, how can I play with my child? Try and come up with some game plans for how you can actually play with the children. Don't just kind of sit there and wait for the child to come and then go, oh goodness, they're here now, let's sort something out. There's things like the craft cupboard you can use, and if you look in the main area, Diane is creating kind of an ideas board. So there's all sorts of things in there, things you can do with the tough spot, things you can do with handprints, things you can do with other things, paper plates, stuff like that. The other thing that Diane kind of got us to do, which I can't demonstrate to you because I don't know where they've all gone, I think they'll probably end up being displayed somewhere, is Diane got lots of people to create things with handprints. So basically to make a handprint and to decorate it in some way. So some people, so one person made like an imprinted handprint, like in like a papier-mâché kind of thing. Some people just gave a painted handprint. Some people decorated or drew a face on it or drew a picture around it, or, you know, there's all sorts of things. So basically, like, Diane's idea was that there's 100 different ways in which you can play just using people's hands and feet. So obviously chucking them in paint and then making prints on them, or drawing around them, or decorating them, or, you know, all sorts of random things like that. So there's always ideas you can use, even without loads of resources, loads of money, and lots of time. So that's some ideas on creative interaction. The summary that we've been given is: sustaining interaction between children is challenging and complex. It requires play workers to be alert at all times to signals and messages being sent. Sharing information and knowing your child well are really important. Using observation and picking up the right strategy for the right child. If you want to know more information about all of this, I'd recommend speaking to Diane, because she's very creative and she's brilliant at playing with the children and kind of taking on board their needs and their kind of their quirks, etc. I'm okay at that, but I think she's better. So if you have more questions, ask her. I'm not going to say loads and loads more. Hopefully, while in the stuff that I've said, you've had the right information to be able to fill out your book effectively. Obviously, other than that, let's move on to the next section.